project. And there's some crayons. The teacher has taken some crayons, and there's a piece of paperboard. And what's happened is they've taken a hairdryer or a paint stripper. They've heated up the crayons, and your expectation is that this is an easy project to do. And if you look down the side, you give it a go, and voila, right? You've got a mess. The crayons are rolling everywhere. You thought, hey, this would be very easy, and it turns out to be a little bit of a disaster. So the expectation was a nice art project. The reality was the crayons are rolling around, and it ends up melting and ends up making a little bit of a mess. The next one I have, the expectation is what you see is coffee cake in a cup. You think, oh, that's easy. You find that on the internet. You give it a whirl. You put it in the microwave, and next thing you know, the reality is you've got a mess. So the expectation was easy to make coffee cake in a cup. The reality is, yeah, you've got a mess here. Okay, go ahead. One more, if you would. You see this Ann Getty's photo, right? And you're thinking, hey, I've got an extra pumpkin. It's Halloween. It's easy to do. I'll cut a couple holes for the legs. Oh, go ahead. And voila, you know what you've got? You've got a crying baby here. So the reality wasn't what you expected. The expectation, easy to make Ann Getty's photo. The reality is you've got a crying baby. Okay, next one. So what's our expectation? Well, one day we're all going to pass away. We know that that's going to happen. And our expectation is that our assets are going to pass smoothly on to our family and our loved ones and to the ministries and charities we care about. Okay, next one. And so what's the reality? Well, the reality is that those assets, some of the money that we thought was going to be there may not. And the time it takes to get that to our loved ones and to the ministries and charities that we care about can leave our beneficiaries crying like that baby in the previous picture. So why is that? Well, without some planning, some of those assets may end up going through probate. You're going to have to hire an attorney, go through the probate process. There's going to be a cost, and that's going to take some time. Could be a number of years. Okay. So why is it important to have a gift plan? Okay. Next one. So my gift plan will show me the right beneficiaries plus the right assets equal the right way to give. Okay. Next one. So the right beneficiaries, those that you care about, your family, your loved ones, and the ministries and charities that you care about. Okay. So using the right assets, what are the right assets to give your family, and what are the right assets to give charity, and is there a difference? Okay. So if you leave your traditional IRA to your children or to your spouse, right, when they make the withdrawals, it's going to be taxed if it's a traditional IRA. If you leave your traditional IRA to ministry, it's not taxed. Or if you leave a percentage, you might say, well, I'm going to leave 5% or maybe 10% of that IRA to the church. The church, being a 501c3, is not going to have to pay tax on that. Now, what they've done with the IRA, you used to be able to extend your children, if they inherited that, could extend that over their lifetime. And now what they've done is they've said, no, the government with the Secure Act said, look, we're going to make them withdraw that within a 10-year period. Okay, the next one. So again, some items are going to go through probate, and some assets are going to pass direct. Okay, next one. So what typically goes through probate? Well, anything that's in your name and your name alone. Let's say you own a home with your spouse. Well, what happens when one of you dies? Then typically that asset is owned in that person's name and their name alone. But there are some items that are going to pass direct. An IRA, a pension, a 401k, life insurance, where you've named beneficiaries on those contracts, your bank account, if you've set it up payable on death, and again, stocks and bonds, if you've got those set up as transfer on death, or anything that's in a living trust is going to pass direct. outside of probate. Okay? So choosing the right ways to give. There are a lot of ways to give. A direct bequest, a gift from a will, right? What about a charitable remainder trust? I helped someone who said, look, I've got a farm. I'm willing to give my farm to the church, but I need income for a number of years. Well, one way to do that is through a charitable remainder trust. What they did is they gifted the farm to the ELCA. We sold the farm, invested that money, and then paid them for a number of years. They wanted to be paid for 10 or 20 years, and then the remainder becomes the gift at the end. Another sort of split gift like that is a charitable gift annuity. What if your concern is about, am I going to outlive my assets? Well, what about a charitable gift annuity where it pays out for your lifetime and then your spouse's lifetime, and then the remainder becomes the gift at the end? So a charitable gift annuity is a way to give. Charitable IRA rollovers. You know, it used to be age 70 and a half, but now when you reach age 72, the government is going to make you take required minimum distribution. So they're going to ask you to take RMDs. Well, what if you get to that point in your life and you say, you know, I'm pretty comfortable. I don't really need that extra income. What if you make a qualified charitable distribution? If you go right from the trustee or the custodian to the church gets a larger gift. You don't add that to your adjusted gross income, and the church gets a gift where the taxes aren't paid on the money that comes over. I help with donor-advised funds. Maybe someone says, look, I'm willing to put a lump sum in, and I'm going to pay out over time. You get a large tax deduction up front, and then you can make payments over time through that donor-advised fund. An easy way to make a gift is from a beneficiary designation. Sometimes people will say, Tim, it sounds like it's going to be expensive. I have to get an attorney. I have to get someone to help me set that up. But what if you have an IRA? In my case, I have 3 children. And if I divide 100% by 3, I get 33 1/3. Well, what happens is the custodian doesn't want to break that, or the trustee doesn't want to break that into a third. They might say, well, Tim, round that to the nearest whole percentage, that gift, or round that to the nearest 1/10 of a percentage. And what if I solved that problem by saying, well, what if I gave each of my children 30% and gave 10% to the church? Wouldn't that solve that problem? Each get 30%. We're working with whole numbers. 10%, that works out nicely. So beneficiary designation is an easy way to leave a gift. I help with named endowments. Somebody might come to me and say, well, Tim, you know what? I'd like to give to the church even after I'm gone. What if I set something up where I could have the church receive income every year for a number of years? And I might say, well, sure. You can set up a named endowment. With $25,000 a year, it would pay $1,000 a year. And people will say, well, Tim, how long? In perpetuity. As long as that money earns an investment return equal to what it's paying out or greater, you know what? That you can actually endow your stewardship, what you've given to the church. I help with gifts of real estate and other complex assets, gifts of stock, although sometimes I'll see someone give stock to the church, and that's a wonderful gift. But again, if that's at the end of the life, the children are going to get the step up in basis, so to the fair market value at the date of death. And so maybe an IRA or retirement account would have made more sense. And I also help churches with endowments for operations or for mission. Okay, the next. So what is a gift plan? How do I make one? Okay, next one. So what I do when I meet with people is I want to know, tell me about your family and loved ones. How many children do you have? Let me know, are your parents still around? Tell me about any really close friends that you're caring for. Okay. And then I'd say, well, tell me a little bit about your Lutheran journey. Tell me about, how did you come to Living Waters? Tell me about your Lutheran faith. Okay. And then tell me a little bit about your assets. I don't need to see financial statements. I just need to have give me kind of a ballpark figure. Okay. So let's just do a quick plan here. Let's just take a look. All right? So the Olson family has a plan. They've decided they want to leave 2/3 of what they have to their children. They're going to leave 1/3 of what they have to ministry and charity. Okay? But again, they're faced with this. What do I give? Do I give stocks? Do we have bonds, personal property, real estate, IRAs, 401, 403, pension, life insurance, cash? Okay? So we took a look, and actually, to simplify things a little, they have some home equity, some life insurance, bank account, mutual funds, 401k. They have an IRA, and what they've decided, okay, is that they would do is they're going to gift their IRA. Now, they're not currently giving their IRA. What they're doing is they're drawing on it during their lifetime, leaving it for their spouse, and then what we're doing is we're gifting the remainder. Okay, the next slide. I know this is a little bit difficult to see, but what we're looking at here is what if something happened to both of you on the way home, you're out one night, something happened. So if you both passed away, what would happen? On the far left, it's probate. The house was going through probate. They hadn't set anything up for the house. But all the retirement accounts and life insurance were going to go, their total estate is $750. What they've done is child 1 and child 2 are each receiving $250, and what they've done is they've left $125,000 to the church, $62,500 to World Hunger, and $62,500 to Lutheran Outdoor Ministry Center. So what we're really doing is we just want to take a look, a snapshot. If something were to happen to you today, what would happen? How would the assets flow? Where would they go? Okay. So again, what I suggest is explore your passions, create a gift plan. I can help put that plan into effect and help you gain assurance that what we're doing is gifting the right asset. Okay. So sometimes people will say, Tim, I have a will, and it just so happens I met with a woman not long ago. She said, you know what, I've got a will, but I've got a house that I don't even own, and in my will I'm gifting that home. And I've got kind of a sad story to tell as well. I met at a church about like this, and the pastor said, Tim, you know what? A guy really wanted to be here. Doug really wanted to be here. He couldn't make it. Will you meet with him? And so I met with Doug. He was in skilled nursing. What happened is we put a gift plan together. He said, Tim, that's a wonderful plan. Only one problem. He's like, I don't have a will. And I'm like, Doug, well, let me just give you the names of some people that I've had good luck with in the past. You could use them or someone else. He said, look, I'll go in a different direction. But what happened is COVID hit, and then after that, they moved Doug to hospice. That's how serious his condition was. And we were able to get a will together. But Doug, he was never married. He had no children. He had no relatives, no immediate relatives. And he did not want to die intestate, where the state decides what happens to what he had. Luckily, we were able to put a will together. It was all done video online and notarized and witnessed. And he left everything he had to the churches he had attended. But had he not had a plan or had something in place, the state would have decided, and I can guarantee you this, that the state wouldn't have said, well, let's see where Doug went to church. I think he wanted the money to go in that direction. It wouldn't have gone there. Okay, the next one. I don't have much. Sometimes I'll sit down with people. They'll say, Tim, I really don't have a lot. And we'll sit down and they'll say, oh, well, you know what, I've got this, and I inherited this, and I've got, and so sometimes it's surprising. Okay. I haven't decided. I know with COVID now, it's like, well, you know what, there's no time like the present to maybe think about putting a plan in place, okay? So I need to find an attorney first. Well, we saw earlier on that beneficiary designation, you could simply leave a gift by adding Living Waters as a beneficiary to any percentage that you're comfortable with. It could be 2% or 3% or 5%. So it's easy to leave a gift. You don't have to find an attorney. It does make sense to have an attorney look over the legal matters. Okay? But the key is not to have the plan end up looking like this. Okay? And what I'm hoping is that your expectation and that your reality look one and the same. Okay. And now I'd like to talk just a little bit about the need briefly. This happens to be Pastor Sarah. She's the pastor of my church. I'm a member of Bethlehem Lutheran in St. Charles. I grew up there. And this is actually, Pastor Sarah received a Fund for Leaders scholarship. And what happens to a young person when they get out of school? They'd like to go on to seminary, but they've got a lot of debt. And they're a wonderful leader. And Pastor Sarah's husband is, well, he's still in school, just finishing up his PhD. But in any event, you know what? Without helping the young people to go on to seminary, they might not ever take that course in their lives. And Pastor Sarah, when Pastor Mark Larson left, our lead pastor, she stepped into the role. And then they finally offered her that job, but she might not even have been a pastor if it weren't for Fund for Leaders. So Fund for Leaders provides full, partial scholarships to those who are thinking about the seminary. Okay. And then I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about world hunger, too. Go ahead. And I know you can't see these pictures, but that top picture is a woman, Dasan Mint. She's 67 years old. She's spent her life working in the rice fields in Myanmar, and she's gotten to an age where she simply can't do that anymore. And what happens is ELCA, World Hunger, makes a micro loan to her. It's a couple $100. And behind her is she's in a one-room shop. She started her own little business, buying and selling some goods. And now she's happy because she can provide for herself even when she's older. In the second picture here is a woman by the name of Verdell. Verdell lived in the Austin neighborhood of Chicago, and back in 2008, when there was the downturn, she lost her job. And so what happened is she has her mother, who's older, has Alzheimer's, and she had to decide, do I look for another job or do I try to make a go of it? And so what happens is throughout the month, toward the end of the month, the money starts running low, and she visits the local food pantry in the Austin neighborhood. Well, the ELCA World Hunger supports 400 food pantries across the U.S., and it really makes a difference for people like Verdell. And then the lower picture is of a woman in Uganda, and what happened was she's a single mother of 5 children. Basically, they're homeless. She's struggling to feed them, and she's given the devastating diagnosis that she's HIV positive, she and her young daughter. And so what does ELCA World Hunger do? Well, they provided her with a home. It's really a hut with a thatched roof, but she has access to fresh water, and they provided a few goats, and she's able to sell the goats and the goats' offspring and the milk, and to purchase the medicine she needs for her HIV. So what we've done is taken a hopeless situation for this woman and really given her hope. I'd like to tell you one more. I've just got one more story, and it's my story, if you guys don't mind. You know what? I always saw myself as the donor to the church. And I thought, you know what? I've been a member. I was married at the same church. I've been there for 35 years. My children were all baptized and confirmed at that church. And I've volunteered to help at Hesed House, a homeless shelter. I worked there for so many years, I don't even remember when I started. And so I saw myself as the donor. I've given to the church for quite a number of years. But something happened back in 2006. It was November 26, 2006, and my wife and I and my family were downtown at the big Chrome Bean in Millennium Park. We were waiting for our daughter to join us with her boyfriend to get a picture, just a family photo, and we got a call. We got a call from the chaplain at Lutheran General in Park Ridge, and when you get a call from the chaplain, it's not a good call. They said, you need to get here immediately. Your daughter's on life support. And I thought, he must have us confused. That can't be. Saw my daughter a few hours before. She was fine. Sure enough, we raced to the hospital, and my daughter has had a brain aneurysm, and she's on life support. And they're telling me, you know what? we don't know if she's going to make it. It's nip and tuck here. We don't know. And we're like, well, what are our options? And they said, there are no options here. We're going to go in and do a craniotomy, remove the bones, and see if we can stop the bleeding. If we can't, that's it. And you know what? At the same time, my wife had a lump in her neck, and she was diagnosed with cancer. And we're all, everybody's thinking about this cancer diagnosis. Same sort of thing is going on. They said, you know what? A surgeon said, I'm not really comfortable. I need another surgeon. They're going to add an additional surgeon to this surgery. That's how bad things were. But that started getting me to think a little bit. We're at Lutheran General, and I'm just about, I just can't handle what's happening in my life. And who should show up? It's a Sunday afternoon. He's given 3 sermons earlier in the day. Pastor Mark Larson shows up. And when I look back at that now, I started thinking about faith. So what is it that gets us through the difficult times in life? When life throws us a lemon, and man, did I have a lemon thrown at me. It's like, we don't know if your daughter's going to make it. Things aren't looking good with your wife. And I started thinking about faith, and I started thinking about, well, you know what? I was married at the church. Our children were baptized there and confirmed. They received their first Bible. And then I started thinking about when Pastor Mark came out, and I thought, what about faith? What is it that gets you through the most difficult times? And I realized that it's faith. It's faith that gets you through. But this story isn't just about me and faith. You know what? We're all going to lose. We're all going to lose our parents someday. We might lose a child. We could lose a spouse or a loved one. You know what? We could lose a job that we really cared about. We could struggle with addiction. We could see the dissolution of a marriage. So what is it that gets us through the difficult times in life? And when the surgeons are telling you, you know what? We don't know if we can get the job done. We don't know. Where do you turn? Where do you turn? And then I think about, what about the end of our lives? What is it that gets us through that difficult time at the end of our life? And to make a long story short, both my wife and daughter survived. They're fine today. And if you ask me, I would say it's the prayers that made things go in the right direction. I started to take a look at, and how do you develop faith? Where did that faith come from? And then I thought that week after week, month after month, year after year of sitting in there and listening to the Word. And when I started, I realized that a gift is a transfer of value for which nothing is received in return. And I started thinking about that definition of gift. Or if you get something in return, it's something that's inconsequential, like a handshake or a thank you or a pat on the back. Attaboy. And I started realizing that I saw myself as the donor, but the church had given me a lot, and it had given me faith. And when I put that, when I'm doing this equation and I add faith into the value of things, I realize, silly me, that I'm not the donor in my relationship with the church, that the church has become the donor in my life and has given me faith. And so with that, really, that's all I had. I'm happy to give you my card. I've got cards here. And you know what? I meant to pass this around. If I could just get a name, it would be very helpful. I know, and I brought a couple of things, but if I could get a name, it would be really helpful. But do you have any questions or anything that I could answer? Yep. Go. Yeah, what you would do is, of course, now with a 401k or any retirement, if you name someone other than your spouse as the primary, they're going to want to know what's going on here. And so you name your spouse, but as a secondary, you might have your kids you might have your kids named, but you can, add your kids and add the church. Or if you have multiple accounts, maybe this is an account where you say, well, I could give, a big portion of this. So you could make the church a primary beneficiary. You're just a letter from your spouse would probably have to be sent saying, I agree to this. This is okay. We have several retirement accounts. Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so if you have two children, maybe I'm giving, each of my children 45%, and I'm adding the church along that same line, 10%. Now, here's what I do is I recommend that someone put, Living Waters Lutheran Church, sometimes there's hardly enough space, located at, it's probably not so important here, but with many, if there are many, St. John's or St. Paul's or, Grace Lutheran, I sometimes say with tax ID, ask the church for their tax ID, and they can, that way we make sure. Now with Living Waters, I'm sure oh yeah, I'm sure there are many others, but if you get the tax ID from the church, say, hey, with tax ID, or you could just put Living Water with tax ID, and that'll make sure. Actually, I have a story like that. A church out in DeKalb got a gift, $6,000. They were so happy about that. It was for Bethlehem Lutheran, and then they found out it was Bethlehem Lutheran in St. Charles, my church, that was getting it. And they were like, oh no, we actually thought that was coming to us. So it is, and you know what? It's probably somebody who's settling the estate going, you know what, which church did Mom and Dad go to? Oh, Bethlehem, yeah, it's probably the one here in town, and it may not have been. It may have been, they wanted it to go to a church, a different Bethlehem they had attended earlier, that sort of thing. So it's really easy. And again, there's no cost to meet with me. My background is one of a financial advisor. So I was a stockbroker, a registered investment advisor, licensed to sell insurance and annuities and long-term care. But there's no cost. There's no cost to the church. There's no cost to you to meet with me. And sometimes people will say, well, I'm going to go see an attorney. I'll say, well, you know what? The attorney's going to say, provide me with a list of your assets. So maybe sitting down and talking with me first may help you get organized, or if it can cut down the time that you have to spend with the attorney, could be helpful. I mean, it is good with the legal work, of course. We're not, able to give legal or tax advice, that sort of thing. But really, yeah, I mean, we're here as a service, and there's no cost. Again, no cost to the church or to people I meet with. Here, sorry, I've taken my mask off, but I'll give you cards too, just to pass out some cards, guys. And so really, that's all I've had. I've been here a couple of times before. This is a wonderful church. I love that service. I mean, just really good things are going on here. But that was just wonderful service this morning. I really, really enjoyed that. So, yep. And see, that's the thing with the will. The will is going to typically dictate things that need to go through the will. So I mean, if your home is in trust, then that wouldn't go through. And if all your retirement, there may be very little that actually, and that's what the Lord is trying to do. Is in Illinois, if there's 100,000 or more, it needs to go through probate. If it doesn't actually pass direct or isn't in a trust, anything over 100,000 means it needs to go through probate. If it's under that, an estate can be settled with small estate affidavits, which is sort of an easier way to do that. But they make it mandatory for anything over 100,000. It needs to go. So what the attorneys are trying to do, of course, is get your estate down, make sure things are passing direct. You've named beneficiaries, maybe the house is in trust, and then you have very little. And then what they do is a pour-over will that just says, hey, anything I forgot needs to go into trust, which means there's almost nothing in the estate. So that's the only concern, is that if you're leaving 10% of the will of the probatable assets and there's very little in there, then there's not going to be a lot that's going to come over. But one thing you can do, almost none of the retirement assets go into trust. Trusts pay a higher tax rate than individuals do. So you don't want to put things, you don't want to name the trust until perhaps maybe your death, and at that point that's fine. But what you want to do is you could easily name any of those life insurance, a percent of the life insurance, a percent of the IRAs or 401ks, you could come directly. Because, see, those don't have to go through probate. Those are passed. You have a contract where you've named a beneficiary. So, and typically they don't put those in trust either. They don't have to be. They'll say, hey, that's a retirement asset. Now, if you've got brokerage accounts that aren't retirement accounts and you haven't named those transfer on death, then you know what? Then that could be a probatable asset. So a lot of times they'll say, hey, retitle this account in the name of the living trust, which doesn't become irrevocable until you pass away. Once you pass away, then that trust can't be changed. But up until that point, that trust can be changed or even dissolved if you want before someone passes away. It does get complex. That's why it's good to have an attorney. But it is good to kind of follow the diagram as to what's going to go, how is this going to pass. And people are thinking, oh, I've got a will, nothing will go through probate. That's not necessarily the case. It really depends on how your assets are titled. A lot of people think I've got joint. It doesn't. No, you know what they've done in Illinois now is the same, and they've done this with cars too, is that there's a transfer on death. They allow you to change the deed to transfer on death, and that will allow that real estate. But for years, they didn't have that in Illinois, where you couldn't deed it, transfer on death. And so, let's say the two of you, are married, one of you die. You're saying, well, it's joint, so it's going to go to the other person. Yeah, but then when one passes away, then it's in one name and one name alone. That doesn't solve the. Now, sometimes people say, well, I could add a child. I mean, and I would talk to an attorney about that because of how complicated that can get. But it is nice that Illinois has changed the law that you can have real estate, say TOD, transfer on death. They've allowed that with vehicles these days, which that makes that a non-probatable asset too, if you've got that, title or registered transfer on death. So, and bank account, there are a lot of things people, it's good to check to make sure you've got beneficiaries named on all the retirement accounts and bank accounts and wherever you can. So, again, it's just not waiting like this gentleman, Doug. He was a great guy. He did pass away a few months later, but just wait till the last minute to do something like that. So better to have a plan in advance. Go ahead.
Someone mentioned that the tax code changed recently, like 3 years ago, and it lowered the limits of giving that's tax deductible. I don't know the numbers, but is there a smarter way of giving to the person?
And see, and that's what they did. Is what they're doing is now what they've done is they've raised the standard deduction so high that very, very few people can actually reach the threshold to where their giving is deductible. And so what people will do is they'll bunch. They'll say, okay, well, I'm not going to give this year or next year, but the third year I'm giving a whole. I'll give. So I reach that threshold. But you know what? It's almost like the government is working against us to keep us from making those. Now, most people still do, make those charitable deductions, but a lot of times now they're taking the standard deduction instead of itemizing. And before, you would itemize and you would get the deductions, but really, by raising that, it's kind of eliminated that for some people. So,
So if you're still itemizing, then it doesn't matter how much you give, as long as you itemize, correct?
yeah,
It's still all deductible.
yeah,
If it's not, if it's higher than the standard deduction, then yeah, so what I did, that's one, so we did a few years ago a donor advised fund.
okay,
So, and donor advised funds, I don't want to speak, are in and of themselves 501c3s. So if you put a bunch of money, but you have to have money to put in it. Then you put it in it, and that might create in that year um, enough deductions to put you over, and then you can deduct that donor advised fund donation. Now, you can invest it, and you can even grow some. Of course, there's risk to doing that. And then for the last 3 years, we've been giving out of the donor advised fund to living waters. You can't deduct it again. You can only deduct it the year you put it in there. But
right.
that's one way to at least in that year.
Now the set amount you put in there one time, and you deduct it again, it should be obviously, they should give something to deduct.
You cannot deduct it again. But I've been able to invest a portion of it over time. Now, we're about at the end of it, and I have any money to refund. What's it called? Donor advised fund. I was on one of the slides there.
Yeah, so that is a good way to give. You give sort of a lump at one point. You get a tax deduction at that time for that, and then you make gifts. You tell them, cut a check to the church, cut a check to this charity, and they send the checks out for you. But it's like giving, knowing that I'm going to give in advance. Now you can't. There's no way. Once you've got that tax deduction, there's no way to undo that. But it allows you to give in sort of a bunch, get that tax deduction, which can be very beneficial if you're.
Yeah, and you can set up recurring donations or give to any 501c3 you want to, one time or recurring.
So.
But the trick is, you do have to have a lump of money that you can put there. And so like what we said is like, okay, over the next 3 years, we'll give about this amount of money, and I happen to have, at that time, a chance to put that money aside and then get the deduction that year.
And most of the gifts, though, that I'm talking about here are thinking through what happens. I mean, we are happy to help with donor-advised funds or named endowed, but are really about, we've been blessed, and, what are our thoughts about leaving something, at the end, of course, for your children and loved ones and things like that. But, I'm kind of the little one going, well, what about the church? Think about the church or other charities or places that you're, volunteering or involved. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much. That's really all I've got.
Did you send this presentation, or do you have like a summary or something in there?
Yeah, no, I sent it. I just, and so hopefully you guys